The market square burned beneath a crimson sun, a place where the air itself seemed to carry the weight of despair. Every breath tasted of iron and smoke, thick with the scent of fear. The world felt suspended between life and ruin, as if time had stopped to watch what was happening here. Chains clattered against stone as soldiers dragged the prisoners forward. Men, women, young wolves, each reduced to nothing more than numbers on the lips of traitors. The sound of their suffering blended with the sharp calls of Roman auctioneers, echoing off marble walls that had long forgotten mercy. And in the middle of it all, she knelt, small, silent, trembling, but not broken. Her wrists bore the raw imprint of the chains that bound her. Her hair, once the color of moonlight, was now matted with dirt and blood. Beneath her ribs, her heart fought against the silence of her wolf, a silence that felt heavier than the shackles themselves. For days, that inner voice had been gone. No whispers of instinct, no wild comfort. Just emptiness. She'd been taught that when a wolf's voice vanished, it meant one thing: the spirit had lost its will to fight. But she wasn't ready to surrender, not yet. Around her, the crowd surged and screamed. Their faces were masks of greed, hunger, and hate. Children perched on shoulders to see better, their innocent eyes wide with curiosity, not yet understanding the cruelty they watched. Old women muttered blessings for those about to be sold, while others threw stones at the captives, as if punishing them would cleanse the air of fear. A soldier barked a command, and the first of the prisoners was pulled onto the raised wooden platform. The man's howl broke into the hot air before a spear silenced him mid-scream. Laughter followed. But she didn't flinch. She only watched, her body still, her gaze burning with quiet defiance. Her mother used to say that courage wasn't loud, sometimes, it was the simple act of staying still when the world demanded you crumble. And right now, stillness was all she had left. She had been born under an omen, a child of the disgraced Beta, daughter of a man whose loyalty had once been questioned by the clan he died protecting. Her name had been whispered with pity and fear since the day she took her first breath. The elders claimed her bloodline carried a curse, a sleeping fire that could destroy everything it touched. The silver flame. And as she knelt there, dirt under her nails and tears drying on her cheeks, she wondered if maybe they were right. Maybe the curse wasn't in her blood. Maybe it was the world itself. A gust of hot wind swept through the square, carrying dust and ash into her eyes. She blinked through the sting, her gaze falling to the ground. Beneath her, the cobblestones were stained dark, a mixture of rain, sweat, and blood. So much blood. Then, a sound, low, distant thunder, rolling across the sky. She looked up. For a moment, it was almost easy to imagine the gods were watching, restless in their heavens. The clouds swirled like smoke, and lightning flickered deep within them, pale and wild. And that's when she saw him. At first, he was nothing more than a shadow at the edge of the chaos, a tall figure cloaked in darkness, unmoving while the rest of the market roared around him. But then the sun broke through the clouds just long enough to catch his face. Not the full face, no, just his eyes. Eyes that glowed faintly gold, as though something ancient flickered behind them. For reasons she couldn't name, her breath caught. Those eyes weren't watching the auctioneer, or the soldiers, or the crowd. They were fixed on her. She looked away quickly, her heart hammering. But curiosity, no, recognition, pulled her gaze back. There was something familiar about the energy that rolled from him, something that made the wolf within her stir, faintly, painfully, as if waking from a long sleep. The crowd's chanting grew louder, sharper. Her name was called. The last of the prisoners. The cursed one. The girl with the beta's mark. Hands grabbed her arms, pulling her roughly to her feet. She stumbled, nearly falling, her knees weak from hunger and exhaustion. The ground tilted beneath her, and for a heartbeat she thought she might collapse. But she didn't. She lifted her chin instead. If they were going to sell her, they would at least remember her face. The soldiers shoved her forward, dragging her toward the stage. The wood creaked beneath her bare feet, hot from the afternoon sun. She felt every splinter, every tremor in her bones as the auctioneer turned to the crowd and raised his voice. Behold, he cried, grinning like a man who enjoyed breaking things that couldn't fight back. The daughter of a traitor. Blood of a cursed flame. A bride for death himself. Laughter rippled through the crowd, sharp and cruel. She stood there, shoulders back, eyes steady. The world blurred around her, but her mind stayed focused on one thing, the stranger with the golden eyes. He hadn't moved. He hadn't even blinked. Then the ground trembled beneath her. A heavy, deliberate sound echoed across the square, footsteps. The soldiers straightened. The auctioneer froze mid-sentence. Whispers spread like wildfire. He was here. The dying Alpha King. The man whose name was both legend and warning. Once the fiercest warrior of the northern packs, now a ghost of his former power, crippled, paralyzed, cursed by the gods themselves. They said he hadn't spoken in months. That he ruled from shadows, his will carried out through whispers and steel. No one expected him to come here. Not to this place of filth and ash. Not to claim her. And yet, he had. The crowd parted as his guards appeared, their armor gleaming like bloodied bronze. Behind them came the king, seated, silent, face hidden beneath his hood. The sun caught the edge of his cloak, and for a moment, it looked like smoke wrapped around him, coiling with purpose. The auctioneer stammered, unsure whether to bow or continue. The Alpha raised one hand, and the square fell silent. Even the wind seemed to stop. The guards wheeled him closer, until he was no more than a few feet from her. She could feel his presence now, not just the physical closeness, but the weight of it. The kind of energy that demanded attention without a single word. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. Something deep within her, a buried instinct, trembled, whispering of danger and destiny all at once. And then, he looked at her. The hood shifted, revealing just enough of his face for her to see the truth in those golden eyes. Pain. Power. And something else. Recognition. It was impossible. They had never met. Yet somehow, she knew that he had been searching for her far longer than she'd been running from herself. A murmur spread through the crowd as the Alpha raised his voice. It was deep, rough, the kind of voice that carried both command and sorrow. I'll take her. The auctioneer blinked, startled. The soldiers exchanged glances. Whispers broke out. He hadn't come for sport. He hadn't come for trade. He had come to claim her. The heat around them shifted. The crowd pressed closer, hungry for spectacle. The Alpha gestured once, and a pouch of gold landed at the auctioneer's feet. The deal was done before she could even breathe. The soldiers released her chains. She stumbled again, weightless now, though freedom had never felt heavier. The silence was deafening. She looked at the king, the dying Alpha, the man who had just bought her life. And for the first time in years, she didn't know whether to hate the gods or thank them. Because the truth settled in her chest like a slow, inevitable dawn. She hadn't been chosen for mercy. She'd been chosen for purpose. As the guards led her toward the waiting carriage, her heart twisted. The crowd faded behind her, swallowed by distance. But the last sound she heard wasn't the jeers or the laughter. It was the whisper of thunder, echoing through the clouds. The gods were watching again. The wind tore at her hair as she turned her head one last time, eyes locking on the burning market square. Smoke curled into the air, dark and endless. And from her lips came a whisper, soft but unshakable, words meant not for the crowd, not for the soldiers, but for the heavens themselves. The gods have chosen wrong. The storm broke. Lightning split the sky. And in that blinding flash of light, the world seemed to recognize her, the cursed child of the silver flame. She didn't yet understand what that meant. Not the bond she'd just formed, not the destiny that waited beyond the gates. All she knew was this: something inside her had awakened, and it wasn't going back to sleep. And as the carriage doors slammed shut and the wheels began to turn, her wolf stirred for the first time in days, whispering a single word that sent a shiver through her entire body. Mate. If stories like this awaken your soul, if tales of forbidden love, power, and fate call to something inside you. Subscribe to Sophie's Romance Collections. Because here, we tell stories that burn, stories that breathe, stories that stay. The road stretched ahead in silence, winding through forests that had forgotten the touch of mercy. The carriage creaked with every turn, its wooden frame shuddering against the rhythm of hooves striking stone. Rain had begun to fall, not heavy, but steady, like the sky itself was trying to wash away what had happened in the market square. Inside, she sat motionless, hands folded on her lap, wrists still bearing the memory of iron. The chains were gone, but the ache they left behind pulsed like a heartbeat. The silence inside that carriage was suffocating. It wasn't the kind of silence that offered peace. It was the kind that demanded answers she didn't have. She could feel him outside. The Alpha King. His presence moved like a storm behind her, carried on the scent of smoke and wet pine. Even without seeing him, she could sense his command. It wrapped around her like invisible fire, warm and dangerous, drawing her closer even as every part of her wanted to run. The wheels hit a deep rut, and the jolt pulled her from her thoughts. Her fingers trembled slightly, but she clenched them into fists before the guards could notice. She would not let them see her break. Not here. Not now. The forest thickened. Trees leaned close, their branches heavy with rain, whispering secrets only wolves could hear. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled again, echoing across the mountains like a heartbeat too large for the earth to hold. When the carriage finally stopped, the door opened with a groan. The air outside was colder than she expected. It bit at her skin, sharp and real, reminding her she was still alive. The guards waited. One of them gestured for her to step out. She hesitated, not out of fear, but something else. Instinct. The kind that warned a creature right before it stepped into a trap. But she stepped out anyway. The mud swallowed her bare feet, cool and soft beneath her skin. She looked up. Before her stood the fortress of the Alpha King. It wasn't what she imagined. Not the grand marble halls of old tales, not the golden palaces sung of in pack songs. This fortress was carved from the bones of mountains, massive, ancient, and cold. Its walls were black stone veined with silver, like lightning frozen in rock. Fires burned in tall iron sconces, their flames dancing in the wind. Every breath here smelled of power, of something sacred and dangerous. And then she saw him again. He was no longer cloaked in shadow. The hood was gone. Rain glistened on his hair, dark as midnight, clinging to the sharp lines of his jaw. His face was striking, carved by hardship and battle, every scar a testament to survival. But it was his eyes that held her, the same golden eyes she'd seen in the market. They were steady now, unwavering, as though they saw through every layer she hid behind. He sat in a chair of iron and wood, not a throne, but something simpler, heavier. His body was strong, though weakened by whatever curse bound his legs. Yet even from where she stood, she could feel the energy radiating from him. He didn't need to move to command the air around him, it obeyed him by instinct. The guards bowed their heads. She did not. For a heartbeat, their eyes met again, and in that moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. The rain slowed. The wind stilled. There was only the quiet thrum of connection, fragile, electric, alive. She tried to look away, to bury the spark building in her chest, but something inside her fought back. Her wolf stirred again, restless, curious. She hadn't felt that kind of pull since she was a child, when her power first flared and burned the sacred grove. And then, against the whisper of the rain, his voice reached her. Low. Broken. But powerful enough to silence everything around them. I'll take her. The words lingered in the air, heavy as thunder. She could almost taste them, metallic, final. The guards moved instantly, stepping aside to make room. The crowd from the marketplace was long gone, but the weight of that moment still pressed against her chest. She should have felt relief. She should have been grateful to be taken from that pit of humiliation. But what she felt instead was fury. Confusion. And something else, something far more dangerous. He shouldn't have wanted her. He shouldn't have looked at her like that. Not a king. Not a man cursed by gods. And yet, in his gaze, she saw no pity. Only purpose. The rain began to fall harder, drops cold and relentless against her skin. Her breath came out in clouds as she stood before him, feeling the pull of something ancient in her veins. The Alpha studied her silently. His jaw tightened slightly, his eyes flickering with an emotion she couldn't name. He looked like a man carrying the weight of two worlds, one dying, one yet to be born. Lightning cracked across the sky, lighting the fortress in a brief flash of silver. The air shuddered. And with that flash came a feeling, a deep, magnetic hum that pulled at the edges of her soul. The same energy that once destroyed her clan. The same energy the elders called cursed. It was waking again. She felt it first as a tremor beneath her skin, like heat gathering in her blood. Then, a pulse, a flicker of silver light behind her ribs. She gasped softly, her body arching slightly as the fire tried to break through. But she swallowed it back, forcing herself to breathe, to stay in control. Not here. Not in front of him. The Alpha's gaze narrowed, but he didn't speak. It was as if he'd seen it too. The shimmer of silver light that vanished as quickly as it came. He didn't flinch. He didn't fear it. He understood it. The guards escorted her through the massive doors. The interior was dimly lit, filled with the scent of rain-soaked stone and the faint trace of wolf musk. The air felt charged, alive, as though every shadow carried memory. She followed the sound of his chair rolling across the floor behind her. His movement was slow, deliberate, each push of the wheel echoing through the silent hall. It wasn't weakness, it was command restrained, control made flesh. They entered a chamber where firelight flickered across carved walls. Ancient runes glowed faintly along the stone, their meanings lost to time. A massive window overlooked the forest below, where mist curled through the trees like living breath. She stood near the center of the room, feeling small and yet strangely seen. The Alpha's presence filled the space even before he spoke. The silence stretched. The fire cracked softly, sending sparks up into the dim air. She didn't know what to say. Didn't know if she was meant to bow, to thank him, to curse him. None of those things would have felt true. So she said nothing. He finally broke the silence, not with words this time, but with movement. His hand reached for something beside him, a silver emblem etched with the mark of the moon. He turned it slowly in his fingers, eyes distant, as though lost in thought. Then, he placed it on the table between them and looked at her again. That look felt like a touch. Not physical, but deep enough to make her heart stutter. It was the kind of look that stripped away defenses and left only truth. She hated how her body responded, how every instinct screamed to step closer when logic told her to run. She wondered what he saw when he looked at her. The girl branded by her pack as cursed? The child who watched her family burn? Or something else, something he recognized because he'd once seen it in himself? The firelight caught his eyes again, and for the first time, she noticed the faint scar that ran down the side of his neck, disappearing beneath his collar. It wasn't the mark of a warrior, it was the mark of survival. She could almost feel the echo of his pain. The loneliness behind his silence. And maybe that was what frightened her most. Because pain was familiar. Pain she understood. The thunder rolled again, closer this time. The storm had followed them here, refusing to be left behind. Outside, the wind howled through the mountain passes. Inside, the air between them thickened. Something was shifting. It wasn't just her. It was him too. Beneath that iron composure, beneath the paralysis that chained his body, she could feel it, something alive, something burning to move, to breathe, to fight. And when lightning flashed again, for the briefest moment, she saw it, his hand twitching. Just slightly. But it was enough. The dying Alpha King wasn't as broken as they said. The realization hit her like a blade of ice. The stories had painted him as a fallen legend, a man waiting for death. But the truth standing before her was different. This was a king who refused to die. The storm outside cracked open the sky, and in that flash, she saw them not as enemies, not as strangers, but as two creatures the world had tried to destroy, and failed. The guards left, the door closing behind them with a hollow thud. Now, there was only the two of them. And the silence between them wasn't empty anymore. It was charged, dangerous, alive. Her heartbeat echoed against the stone walls, each thump too loud, too revealing. She hated that he could probably hear it. Hated that she didn't want to stop looking at him. But most of all, she hated the way something inside her whispered that she belonged here. The rain outside softened, turning to mist. The fire burned low. He didn't speak again. He didn't have to. His presence filled every space her fear tried to occupy. And deep within her chest, beneath the scars and silence, her wolf finally stirred, not in warning, but in recognition. Because what she felt in that moment wasn't danger. It was destiny. The carriage rocks through the storm, its wheels grinding against the stones that lead toward the heart of the mountains. The air inside is thick with silence, the kind that carries memory in every breath. She sits still, her hands pressed to her knees, watching the blur of lightning through the slit of the carriage window. The world outside flickers between shadow and flame, and each flash drags her deeper into the place she's tried so hard to forget. The night her world ended. She remembers the scent first, smoke, pine, and blood. The sacred grove had always been their sanctuary, the one place untouched by violence. But that night, even the moon seemed to turn its face away. The trees crackled with fire as the pack closed in around her. Their eyes glowed with the same light as the flames, full of judgment, full of fear. They said her wolf was not of their blood. They said the gods made her wrong. They said she carried the curse of silver fire, the kind that devoured souls. She had begged them to listen, to see her as more than the power she could not control. But they did not see her. They saw a weapon. And so, at 19, she was forced to kneel before the council, the air stinging with smoke, her knees pressed into wet ash. The elders circled her in silence, their chants rising in rhythm with the wind. When the mark was burned into her skin, a spiral of runes etched over her shoulder, she did not scream. She only stared into the fire that surrounded her and made herself a promise: if she survived, she would never bow again. The carriage jolts, dragging her back to the present. Her pulse steadies. She doesn't look out the window anymore, she doesn't need to. The darkness beyond the glass mirrors the one inside her. They had called her a curse. But the truth was simpler, crueler. She had been born different, too strong, too aware, too untamed for a world that worshipped obedience. Her wolf was ancient, a bloodline the pack had forgotten existed. Some said it came from the first moon, from the line of those who walked before packs had names. The ones who could command the elements. But power like that was never meant to survive. When her wolf had awakened on the night of her 20th moon, the grove had burned. Trees turned to white fire, and every howl in the forest fell silent. She hadn't meant for it to happen. She hadn't known she could. The silver flames had erupted from her chest like a scream she couldn't contain, a storm of light that answered the pain she'd buried for years. By dawn, the grove was gone. The pack was broken. And she was alone. Now, years later, that same power stirs beneath her skin again, restless, alive, whispering against her ribs like wine through dry leaves. Her wolf speaks softly inside her mind, a voice made of fire and shadow. They fear you because you burn brighter than their gods. But she doesn't answer. She can't. Because power, in her world, means exile. Fire means death. She pulls her cloak tighter around her shoulders and forces herself to breathe. The fortress looms closer now, its towers slicing through the mist like blades. The closer she gets, the louder the memories grow. The faces of those who betrayed her. The ones who stood by and watched. The ones who whispered prayers for her soul as if she were already gone. And beneath it all, one memory burns sharper than the rest. The boy who tried to help her escape. His name was Kale. He had been her friend since childhood, a hunter's son with quiet eyes and hands that smelled of cedar and smoke. He had found her the night before the judgment, hiding beneath the roots of the ancient oak. He'd told her to run, to leave before the elders could find her. But she couldn't. Her mother's body had still been warm in the ashes. He'd tried to drag her away, his hands trembling as he pulled at her arm. But the guards had found them. They'd beaten him for treason and chained her for defiance. The last thing she remembered of him was the sound of his scream as they took him away. No one had spoken his name since. Now, as the carriage rattles through the iron gates of the Alpha King's fortress, she wonders if Kale ever survived. Or if his ghost still waits for her in the ruins of the grove. The wheels slow. The sound of hoofs fades. She lifts her eyes to the window. The fortress rises like a scar against the mountainside, vast, solemn, carved into the bones of the earth itself. Firelight spills from narrow windows, casting ribbons of gold across the rain. The air hums with energy, the kind that prickles against her skin, as though the stones themselves recognize her. When the carriage stops, she doesn't move right away. Her pulse drums against her ribs, steady and loud. She can feel it again, that pull. The strange tether that connects her to the Alpha King. It's stronger now, almost tangible. She closes her eyes and feels for the bond. It thrums faintly beneath her skin, a vibration of energy that seems to echo from deep within the mountain. It feels wrong. It feels right. It feels inevitable. When the guards open the door, she steps out without waiting for them to speak. The rain greets her again, cold and sharp. The air smells of iron and wet stone. Her gaze drifts upward, toward the tallest tower where she knows he waits. The dying Alpha King. The one they said could no longer stand. The one who had chosen her in front of all his people. She doesn't understand why. But she knows this much, her story didn't end in the grove. Whatever waits for her beyond these gates is only the beginning. She walks through the courtyard, her footsteps echoing against the stone. The guards follow silently, their eyes avoiding hers. They fear her too. She can smell it, that subtle tang of unease that always follows her. The great doors open again, the same ones that swallowed her hours ago. Inside, the hall stretches into shadow, the walls alive with the flicker of torches. The scent of pine resin and wolf musk thickens the air. And then she feels it. His presence. It rolls through the air like thunder, steady, commanding, ancient. Even without sight, she knows he's near. The energy presses against her, wrapping around her chest, making it hard to breathe. Her wolf goes still. There's no sound of movement, no voice. Only that pull, the quiet, magnetic force that draws her deeper into the hall until she stands at its center again. And then she sees him. He's no longer the fragile figure from the marketplace. He sits upright, his posture stronger, his gaze sharper, his aura heavy enough to make her heart falter. The firelight throws golden shadows across his face, carving every line of pain and strength into stark relief. For a moment, she forgets to breathe. Her wolf stirs again, whispering words she doesn't want to hear. He's like you. Touched by fire. She doesn't know what that means, not yet. But the truth hums beneath the words. Something ancient, something shared. He studies her without speaking, and for the first time, she senses the storm inside him. Beneath the calm exterior lies a man bound not just by paralysis, but by power too dangerous to control. His body is broken, but his spirit isn't. And something in her recognizes that kind of wound. Two souls marked by fire. Two bodies that refused to die when the world demanded they burn. Her breath trembles as she lowers her gaze, not out of submission, but because meeting his eyes feels too much like stepping into flame. The silence stretches between them, heavy, electric. She wants to ask him why. Why he chose her. Why he looked at her like he'd seen her before. Why the moment his gaze found hers, she felt the echo of something older than time. But the words die in her throat. Because deep down, she already knows. This isn't chance. This isn't mercy. It's fate, twisted, inevitable, and written long before either of them were born. The fortress stands like a relic of gods, an echo from a world that refused to die. Its towers claw at the sky, their tips swallowed by mist. Moonlight spills through shattered marble pillars, touching ancient runes that still hum with old magic. The walls breathe the stories of those who came before, warriors, kings, wolves, and gods. Every corridor whispers in a language older than the packs themselves. She moves through its halls like a ghost resurrected. The air is colder here, heavy with memory. Her footsteps sound small against the vastness of stone, her cloak dragging across the ancient floor. Silver light paints her skin pale, and for a fleeting moment, she sees herself reflected in the marble, her face, her eyes, her scars. But behind her reflection, shapes move. Shadows with eyes that glow faintly gold. The fortress watches her. She can feel it in her bones, this place is alive. The air hums with the kind of energy that bends the edge of reality. Symbols carved into the stone shift when she blinks, their lines changing form as if trying to speak. The torchlight flickers not from the wind, but from something deeper, like the rhythm of a pulse buried in the walls. And at the center of it all, he waits. The Alpha King. His throne is not one of gold, but of stone and silence. He sits surrounded by banners faded from time, each marked with sigils of the moon. His hands rest on the arms of a gilded chair that gleams beneath the firelight, a throne and a prison all at once. His body is still, carved by pain, but his eyes burn brighter than any flame. She feels it immediately, that pull again. The thread between them tightening, as if the air itself were reaching to bind them closer. She doesn't want to move closer. But she does. His gaze follows her like a storm measuring distance before it strikes. When he finally speaks, his voice is low, worn by power and time. Do you dream of the fire? The question freezes her mid-step. It's not just his words. It's the way he says it, as though he already knows the answer. She opens her mouth, but no sound comes. Because yes, she dreams of the fire every night. Of silver flames consuming the grove. Of screams that echo long after she wakes. Of her mother's voice fading into smoke. But she doesn't tell him that. He looks at her like he's seen that same fire. Like he's burned in it too. The torches flicker, and for a moment, the walls seem to come alive. Murals long faded begin to breathe. Wolves made of gold leaf and pigment snarl under the moon, their eyes glinting like molten metal. And then she sees it, a fresco at the far end of the hall. Her heart stops. Painted across the marble in colors older than time is a woman. Silver fire burns in her palms. Her hair spills like liquid light. And her eyes, they are hers. Not similar. Not reminiscent. The same. She stares at the image, her throat tightening, her pulse drumming in her ears. The Alpha King's voice cuts through the silence again, softer this time. The prophecy speaks of the one with the silver flame. Born under the blood moon. Destined to either cleanse the packs, or destroy them. Her knees weaken. She grips the edge of a pillar, feeling its cold bite against her palm. Her. The cursed daughter of a disgraced beta. The outcast who burned her home to ash. The one the pack tried to erase from memory. She turns to him, her voice barely a whisper. Why me? He doesn't answer. Instead, his gaze drifts toward the mural again. Because the gods don't choose by worth. They choose by need. The words sink into her like a blade wrapped in truth. The gods had chosen her. The same gods that watched her suffer, that stayed silent when her world burned. She steps closer to the fresco, her fingers brushing the painted stone. The moment her skin touches it, the air ripples. The flames in the torches shudder, bowing inward. A faint tremor runs through the floor beneath her. The paint begins to glow, faint at first, then bright enough to force her to look away. She stumbles back, breathless, and when she looks again, the mural has changed. The woman in the painting now stands with a man beside her. His eyes are gold. His body, broken and bound. The silver flame wraps around them both, uniting, devouring, becoming one. Her heart pounds. The same golden eyes now look at her from across the hall, real, alive. He doesn't move, but his expression hardens. The gods bind what they cannot destroy. The words feel like a sentence, not a comfort. She can't tell if he's angry or afraid. Maybe both. But in his gaze, she sees the truth he won't say aloud. He's part of this prophecy too. She takes a step back, her breath uneven. You knew, she whispers. You knew before you bought me. He says nothing. The silence between them stretches, full of answers she doesn't want to hear. Outside, thunder growls. Inside, the walls hum again, the runes flaring faintly with silver light. This marriage, this union. It isn't about love. It's about power. Prophecy. Survival. She's not here to heal a dying king. She's here to complete something older than them both. But there's a question burning in her chest, one that refuses to die. If the gods chose her to burn, then why does he look at her like she's the one who can save him? The fire inside her stirs again, restless, hungry. She feels it rise to her fingertips, a faint shimmer beneath her skin. For years she's buried it, feared it, hated it. But now, standing in the heart of this ancient fortress, it feels different. It doesn't hurt. It feels right. She closes her eyes, and for a brief second, she can hear whispers, voices like wind and flame. Words in a language she doesn't know but somehow understands. Child of silver. Keeper of fire. The world ends and begins in your hands. Her eyes snap open. The glow fades. The room stills. He watches her with that same quiet intensity, as if weighing her against the stories carved into the walls. You felt it, didn't you? He says softly. She doesn't answer. She doesn't have to. He smiles, faintly, bitterly. Then it's true. The myth awakens. The words sink into her bones like cold rain. She turns toward the fresco again, studying the symbols etched beneath it. Each one tells a story, the rise and fall of Pax, the wars that shaped their world, the cycles of fire and moonlight. But at the center, one symbol burns brighter than the rest, a spiral of light surrounded by wolves bowing in flame. The mark on her shoulder. Her hand drifts to it instinctively, tracing the scar that never healed. It pulses beneath her touch, as if answering. Her throat tightens. What happens to her? She asks quietly, nodding to the woman in the painting. He doesn't hesitate. She dies. And everything she burns becomes new. The words hollow her chest. She feels the ground shift beneath her, not from movement, but realization. This wasn't fate. This was a trap. The prophecy didn't name her savior or destroyer, it named her sacrifice. The fire inside her trembles, flickering between fury and fear. She meets his gaze again, searching for something, mercy, truth, anything. But his face remains unreadable, carved from shadow and resignation. And yet, beneath the weight of prophecy, something else flickers in his eyes. A spark that doesn't belong to fate. It belongs to him. To the man behind the title. To the soul still fighting inside the dying king. He looks at her like she is both his end and his salvation. The silence between them deepens, stretching across centuries of war and ruin. The wind howls through the broken pillars, carrying with it the scent of rain and blood. She turns away from him, her heart breaking under the weight of destiny she never asked for. But as she takes her first step toward the door, her mark burns again, not with pain, but with awakening. The fire answers to her heartbeat. The walls whisper her name. The moonlight bends toward her. And for the first time, she feels it, the world itself shifting around her, as if recognizing its true queen. She doesn't know yet what she'll become. But one truth settles deep within her soul. She may have been chosen to burn. But she'll decide what burns with her. The chamber still hummed with the echo of the council's verdict when silence claimed the hall again. Outside, the storm raged, wind clawing against the fortress walls like the ghosts of every wolf who had ever been betrayed. She stood motionless, her body trembling from exhaustion and blood loss, yet her spirit refused to bow. Her claws had retracted, her heartbeat still too wild to tame. Every flicker of torchlight seemed to mock her as the elders' voices replayed in her mind, unfit, cursed, abomination. The words cut deeper than the wounds across her skin. The Alpha sat in his chair at the far end of the chamber, jaw tight, eyes unreadable. His hand gripped the armrest hard enough to whiten the knuckles. She could smell the iron of his blood, could hear the uneven rhythm of his breath as he fought the pain of standing earlier. For a moment, she thought he might defy them again. But then he turned his gaze away, and in that single gesture, the world seemed to tilt. Her knees almost gave out. When she walked past him, the sound of her footsteps echoed through the marble floor like the heartbeat of something dying. She didn't look back. Not when the guards bowed in forced reverence, not when the shadow swallowed her figure. But the moment the heavy doors closed behind her, the dam broke inside her chest. She leaned against the cold stone and let the fury burn. Every part of her wanted to scream, to tear down the walls, to make them see she wasn't their curse, she was their salvation. Outside, the fortress grounds were littered with the aftermath of battle. The corpses of shadow wolves dissolved into black mist that shimmered before vanishing into the soil. The moon bled red against the horizon, an omen whispered through the wind. Her wolf stirred within, restless and raw. "They'll never accept you," it murmured. "But you were never meant to be accepted." She walked toward the outer gate, dragging her blade through the dirt, leaving behind a scar that glowed faintly with silver fire. The magic that had almost consumed her as a child now pulsed quietly beneath her skin. She remembered the prophecy again, the silver flame, born to either cleanse or destroy. The elders feared it because it was not theirs to control. And the Alpha had looked at her not with fear, but recognition. Beyond the walls, the forest waited, dark, ancient, whispering. The air there felt alive, saturated with the memories of old gods. As she entered, the moonlight broke through the canopy in fractured beams, painting her face in silver. The earth pulsed faintly beneath her bare feet, as though it remembered her bloodline. She could feel it, power awakening, threads of destiny pulling taut. But the weight of heartbreak dragged through her veins like chains. In the fortress, the Alpha sat alone in the ruined council chamber. The smell of smoke still hung heavy. His leg throbbed, the old wound torn open again, blood seeping through the bandages. But he didn't call for the healers. He stared into the fire, seeing not flame but her face, the defiance, the pain, the purity of something uncontainable. He had been told all his life that love was weakness. Yet the echo of her scent haunted every breath he took. The door opened softly behind him. His beta entered, hesitant, the scent of fear clinging to him. "She's gone," he said. The council made sure the gates were sealed after. The Alpha didn't reply. His fingers curled around the emblem of his house carved into the armrest. "Track the shadows," he finally said, voice low, heavy with control. "They weren't random. Someone sent them." The beta nodded and left, but when the door shut again, the Alpha allowed the mask to crack. His hand trembled. He had seen the way the shadows had moved during the attack, how they avoided striking her directly, how their eyes had glowed with something almost reverent. There was a reason the darkness hadn't claimed her. In the forest, she felt the same thing. The shadows had followed her, not as hunters but as witnesses. Their presence slithered along the tree-line, eyes glowing faintly in the distance. Yet none dared to strike. They seemed to move with her, drawn to the pulse of her magic. When she stopped by the river, she saw her reflection shimmer, her eyes faintly silver, her aura flickering like liquid flame. The wolf inside her whispered a truth she had never dared believe: "They bow to you." The night stretched on, a tapestry of pain and awakening. She found an abandoned shrine deep in the woods, half buried under moss and thyme. Carvings of wolves and moons spiraled across its stone surface, and at its center lay a relic, a blade older than memory, forged from silver that pulsed with life. When she touched it, visions flooded her mind. She saw the first wolves kneeling before the moon, saw betrayal carved into bloodlines, saw the Alpha King's ancestors binding her kind to oaths of silence. And through it all, one face appeared again and again, hers. The realization struck like lightning, this was not the first life she had lived. The prophecy was not about her future. It was about her return. At the fortress, the Alpha woke from a dream drenched in sweat. He had seen her in the shrine, had seen the silver flame blooming from her hands, consuming the darkness. The link between them had always been forbidden, but now it pulsed stronger than blood. He rose from his chair, pain burning through his limbs, and for the first time in years, he felt his legs respond. It was faint, trembling, but real. He pushed himself up, gripping the wall for balance. His breath came sharp, ragged, but the strength that returned was not his alone. He could feel her power echoing through his veins, mending what fate had broken. Each step was agony, each movement a rebellion against destiny. But he kept going, out of the chamber, through the hall, toward the balcony where the moonlight pooled. When he finally stood there, body shaking, he looked toward the forest, and he knew. The bond had chosen them long before either had drawn breath. She stood at the shrine, tears streaking her face as the wind howled through the ruins. Her magic surged, silver light unfurling from her palms, reaching toward the sky like wings. Somewhere in the distance, she felt him standing, defying the curse. The connection between them snapped open like a heartbeat shared. The earth trembled. The shadows that had once hunted her knelt in silence. The world was shifting. The fire had awakened. And though they stood miles apart, their hearts beat as one. The war had only just begun. Night pressed against the ruins like a living thing, breathing, watching, waiting. She sat in the glow of a dying fire, her hands trembling as she bound the gash along her ribs. The scent of iron and smoke clung to her skin. Every movement sent a ripple of pain through her body, but she welcomed it. It reminded her she was still alive, still defying the will of those who wanted her forgotten. The crackle of the flames echoed against the stone, lonely and soft, like a heartbeat fading into memory. The forest had gone quiet. No wolves howled, no wings beat against the dark. The air felt suspended, thick with an anticipation she didn't understand until she heard it. A step. Then another. Measured. Familiar. She froze, her instincts flaring. The fire caught the silhouette before the scent reached her. Cedar, rain, and faint steel. Him. He stood at the edge of the firelight, leaning on a broken column for balance, breath shallow but gaze unyielding. He had walked here on his own. The disbelief stole her breath before pride could rise to replace it. His body trembled, but he didn't bow to it. He never had. "Why are you here?" she whispered, her voice scraping like sand through ash. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped closer, the firelight catching the sharp lines of his face, the faint sheen of sweat across his temple. His leg faltered once, and she instinctively rose, then stopped herself, unsure if he would welcome the help. "I told them you were gone," he said finally, voice low, rough, almost human. "But I couldn't feel peace. Not while the bond kept burning." The bond. The invisible thread between them still pulsed in her veins, fierce and unwanted. She tried to sever it in her mind, but the harder she resisted, the stronger it throbbed. "You shouldn't have come," she murmured. "You'll lose everything." He laughed quietly, the sound sharp and tired. "Everything's already been taken." He sank to the ground opposite her, the effort leaving a tremor in his hands. For a long moment, neither spoke. The fire cracked, sending sparks into the night, and the silence between them thickened, not awkward, but weighted with too much truth. Finally, he spoke again, his eyes on the flames. "The curse wasn't just pain," he said. "It was memory. The gods wanted me to remember what I'd done. Every night, every dream, I relive it, the moment I chose power over love. The moment the woman I loved burned because of me." His words hit her like cold rain. She saw the shadow in his expression, not just guilt, but the exhaustion of a man who had carried too many ghosts. She understood that kind of burden. She swallowed hard. So this is your punishment? To live broken. He turned his gaze to her then, and she felt stripped bare under it. No, he said quietly. The punishment was learning what love costs when you betray it. Her chest tightened, the heat from the fire licking her skin as if drawn by his words. The flames flickered higher, casting their faces in shifting gold. Her wolf stirred inside her, restless. The air between them thickened, raw, unspoken need and fear tangled like roots beneath the soil. She looked away first, eyes tracing the ancient carvings around them. The walls told stories of past kings, of wars fought for pride, of wolves who turned on their own. I hear them, she said after a long pause. The old ones. The alphas before you. They speak in my dreams. They tell me what was lost. What was stolen. His jaw tightened. And what do they want from you? To finish what they couldn't, she said, her voice barely audible. To burn the throne and free the bloodline. The silence that followed was suffocating. The wind shifted, carrying embers between them. He studied her as if searching for something beneath her skin. Proof of the prophecy, or maybe the part of her that still belonged to him. And will you? He asked. She met his eyes. If I must. The words were steel, but her heart trembled with something softer, something she wished she could kill. Because even as she said it, part of her wanted to stay. He reached across the small distance between them. The movement was slow, deliberate, as though he feared she might vanish if he moved too fast. His fingers brushed hers, warm, calloused, trembling slightly. The contact sent a jolt through her veins, wild and electric. Her wolf held inside her, not in warning but recognition. He didn't pull back. You could end me right now, he said, voice low. You have that power. But I don't think you will. Her throat tightened. And why not? His gaze didn't waver. Because somewhere beneath all that fire, you still want to believe someone sees you. Something inside her cracked, small, fragile, impossible to mend. The truth of his words pierced deeper than any blade. She wanted to argue, to remind him that he was her enemy, that his people had branded her cursed and hunted her to near death. But she couldn't. Not when his eyes looked at her like that, like she was something worth knowing, worth breaking for. The air between them shifted again, slower now, heavier. She could hear his heartbeat, uneven but strong. Every breath drew them closer to the edge of something neither could control. He leaned forward, the faintest tremor in his voice. Trust me or leave, he said. But if you stay, understand this, there's no turning back. Not from me. Not from what we are. Her pulse roared in her ears. The world outside, the fortress, the council, the prophecy, blurred into silence. Only his words remained, echoing inside her like a promise and a threat. She closed her eyes, letting the sound of the fire fill the space between them. When she opened them again, she saw not the Alpha King, not the cursed ruler, just a man, scarred and haunted, trying to fight his way out of damnation. She reached out, her hand trembling as it found his face. The roughness of his skin under her palm grounded her, real and unholy all at once. Then I'll stay, she whispered. The moment she said it, something ancient stirred, the bond sealing itself with quiet finality. The flames surged higher, painting their faces in light and shadow, their breaths mingling like prayer. He leaned into her touch, eyes closing as if afraid to believe it. She felt his heartbeat against her palm, uneven, desperate, alive. Outside, the wind howled through the ruins, carrying the scent of rain and blood. The gods watched from their broken altars. Somewhere in the distance, the first wolf howled, a long, aching sound that split the night open. And within the fire's glow, two souls scarred by prophecy found the courage to stay. Not because they trusted fate, but because, for the first time, they trusted each other. Dawn crawled over the fortress walls like a wounded beast, slow, heavy, painted in bruised shades of gold and ash. The fires from the night before had long burned out, but their scent lingered, smoke, sweat, and betrayal clinging to every stone. The fortress that had once felt like sanctuary now pulsed with unease, as if the walls themselves knew what was coming. She woke to the taste of copper on her tongue. Her palms were slick with blood, her own. The wound across her arm was shallow but deliberate, drawn with precision, like a signature written in flesh. The mark of a warning, or maybe a message. The world tilted slightly as she tried to stand, and pain radiated from her ribs, but she refused to stay down. She'd been brought to her knees too many times already. The corridors were quiet, unnaturally so. The torches still burned, but their light flickered weakly, dying in the draft. Her wolf stirred inside her chest, restless, uneasy. Something was wrong. Deeply, terribly wrong. The silence wasn't peace, it was the pause before the storm breaks. When she reached the courtyard, the truth hit her like a blade through the gut. The council was already assembled. The same elders who had bowed to her after the attack now stood in a half-circle around the Alpha King, their faces carved in stone. And in the center of them all, his brother. The resemblance was faint, but the arrogance was unmistakable. He wore the same crest, the same bloodline, but none of the strength. His eyes gleamed with the kind of cruelty that came from power tasted too soon. She froze as his voice filled the air, smooth, venomous. "You see? The cursed flame lives." Her stomach nodded. Around her, guards shifted uneasily, their weapons drawn but uncertain where to aim. She could feel the weight of every gaze, accusation, fear, disgust. The same look she'd seen before, on the night her clan cast her out. The Alpha's chair sat at the head of the courtyard, gilded wheels catching the sun. He looked smaller somehow, his face pale, his hands gripping the armrests so tightly that the knuckles turned white. His eyes found hers, and in them she saw a storm, shock, confusion, betrayal, and something else. Guilt. The brother stepped forward, voice rising. "For months, she's been weaving her poison, using her cursed bond to control our king. But I will tell you the truth. His paralysis was not from the gods. It was mine to give." Gasps rippled through the assembly. She felt the world tilt, her vision narrowing to a single point, the Alpha, still silent, still watching. Poison. The word echoed in her skull. Not fate. Not punishment. Betrayal. Her hands trembled, rage and heartbreak twisting together until she could barely breathe. She wanted to scream, to reach for him, to demand he deny it. But he didn't. He didn't say a word. The brother turned his smile on her. "The prophecy speaks of a silver flame that will devour the packs from within. You brought her into our walls, brother. You sealed our doom yourself." The guards moved in. Rough hands seized her arms. She struggled, but the strength in her limbs flickered. The night's fight, the blood loss, the wound, all of it conspired to drag her down. Her wolf snarled inside her mind. Fight. But her body refused. The chains clattered around her wrists, cold against her skin. The weight of betrayal was heavier than iron. The Alpha finally spoke, his voice breaking the silence. "Enough." It was quiet, but it silenced the courtyard. "You will not harm her." The brother's laugh was a serpent's hiss. "Then watch her burn, as the prophecy intended." Lightning cracked across the sky, splitting the horizon in half. The storm had been waiting. She felt it stir in her bones before it broke. The air shifted, the kind of shift that comes before everything changes. The scent of ozone filled her lungs, sharp and metallic. The elders began their chant, ancient, rhythmic, binding. They twisted the old prophecy into chains. She is the flame. She will destroy. She must be silenced. The words seared through her like fire. Her knees hit the ground, her vision fracturing between light and shadow. The world blurred, the sky itself trembling. She saw faces around her, some filled with fear, others with hunger for her fall. And then, his voice again. The Alpha. Stop. But the brother was already moving. He raised the blade, silver-edged and blessed by the moon priests. Let the curse end with her. time fractured. The blade descended. Pain bloomed white-hot as steel-kissed skin. Her blood hit the earth, and the ground trembled in answer. The storm held, the wind tearing through the courtyard with a scream. Something inside her snapped, no, awakened. The fire she had buried for years roared to life, not as heat but as light. Silver, wild, divine. It poured from her like a river unleashed, her scream tearing through the air like thunder. The world erupted. Stone cracked. Torches shattered. The chains melted from her wrists, dripping molten metal onto the ground. The guards stumbled back, eyes wide with terror as the light consumed everything. Through the chaos, she saw him, her alpha. His face illuminated by the fire's glow, his eyes wide with a pain she couldn't read. He tried to reach her, his hand outstretched, his body straining against the weakness that still bound him. But it was too late. The fire had already chosen its path. The brothers' laughter turned to screams. The flames found him first, silver fire licking at his armor, devouring his cruelty, leaving nothing but ash and echo. The council scattered, their chants dissolving into cries of horror. The fortress groaned under the weight of the unleashed energy. And in the center of it all, she stood, blood-soaked, trembling, radiant. The silver flame coursed through her veins, alive, sentient, unrelenting. The prophecy was no longer a warning. It was becoming truth. The storm outside roared in harmony with her pulse. Every heartbeat echoed with fury, grief, and power that no god could cage. Her wolf rose within her, its voice no longer a whisper but a command. They feared you because you are what they could never control. She looked up, and met his gaze one last time. The alpha's eyes glowed, not with dominance, but with heartbreak. He had tried to protect her, but his silence had doomed them both. The fire began to fade, leaving behind ruin and silence. The courtyard was nothing but smoke and memory. The brothers' throne burned. The sky bled light. She dropped to her knees, breath ragged, her skin glowing faintly with what remained of the flame. Around her, the ashes of the council drifted like falling snow. The world she had been forced to serve was gone, and yet she felt no victory, only the hollow ache of loss. The alpha dragged himself toward her, every movement laced with agony. He reached her at last, collapsing beside her in the ruins. His hand brushed hers, trembling. "You weren't supposed to burn," he whispered. His voice was barely sound, just air and regret. She turned to him, her eyes still lit with fading silver. "You weren't supposed to watch." The storm eased. The wind stilled. The light dimmed until only their breathing filled the space between them. She wanted to hate him, to let the anger consume her the way the fire had consumed everything else. But when she looked at him, she saw the truth she had tried so hard to deny. The betrayal hadn't started with him. It had started with destiny. And destiny, she realized, was the cruelest god of all. When the dawn finally broke, it found them kneeling in the ruins of what had been, surrounded by smoke and silence. He was still alive. So was she. But the bond between them, whatever it had been, was now forged in blood and ruin. And somewhere deep within the earth, the silver flame still whispered. It was not done. The earth trembles beneath the weight of her fury. The Colosseum, once a monument to power and deception, crumbles like sand between divine fingers. Stone shatters, pillars collapse, and the air ignites with a pulse that feels almost alive. She stands at the center of it all, breathing fire through her veins. Her skin glows with silver heat, the scent of molten metal thick around her. Chains that once held her fall as liquid light, dripping down to the dust, hissing with the sound of freedom. The voices of the dead alphas rise, 1,000 murmurs blending into one soul-deep command that vibrates through her bones. Child of flame, reclaim your throne. The words pierce her chest, not as invitation but revelation. Her destiny, long denied, now burns unrestrained. Power hums at her fingertips, a dangerous, beautiful storm. Her body trembles with it, but she does not yield. She has been broken, betrayed, silenced, but never destroyed. The fire swirling around her is not vengeance. It is truth unmasked, purpose remembered, divinity reborn. The brother steps forward from the smoke, arrogance carved into every line of his face. Behind him, the council cloaks themselves in fear, muttering prayers to false gods they helped build. Their lies, their manipulations, the blood they spilled, all shimmer beneath the light of her awakening. She looks at them, her eyes twin suns of molten silver, and for the first time they understand what they have made. "You thought I was your weapon," she whispers, voice steady though the ground splits at her feet. "But I was your warning." The silver fire erupts again, no longer wild, no longer wrathful, but deliberate. Controlled. She lifts her hand, and the air obeys. Storm and flame bend to her will, weaving through the ruins, illuminating the fallen sigils that once suppressed her kind. Power recognizes power. The fire bows to its master. Across the ruin, the crippled Alpha drags himself forward through the chaos, his breath ragged, his heart torn between awe and terror. He watches as the woman who once trembled in his halls now stands unshaken in her sovereignty. The poison that crippled him still courses through his veins, but her power touches him, unseen, wordless, and something inside him stirs. The dead weight in his legs begins to fade, replaced by warmth, then strength, then fire. He falls to his knees, not from weakness, but from the unbearable beauty of it. The bond between them, once tentative and hidden beneath shame, now burns visible to all. The fire around her bends toward him, wraps around his form, and in that merging of flame and flesh, his body awakens. His legs twitch, tremble, then rise. For the first time in years, he stands. The brother staggers backward, disbelief breaking his composure. "Impossible," he gasps. "That curse cannot be undone." "It was never a curse," she says, stepping toward him. "It was stolen strength, mine and his, fed to your ambition. Now, it returns." He lunges, desperate, clawing for dominance, his fangs flashing under the stormlight. But she doesn't flinch. The silver flame surges, meeting his attack head-on. When their powers collide, the world blinks white. The air screams. Stone dissolves. For a breathless eternity, everything is light and sound and fury. When the radiance fades, he is on the ground, gasping, his hand reaching for the throne that now lies buried beneath the ruins. He is alive, but broken, his lies stripped, his strength devoured by his own greed. She does not kill him. Death would be mercy. Instead, she turns from him, her gaze meeting the Alpha's across the fire. He walks to her, unsteady but resolute. Each step feels like defiance, like resurrection. When he reaches her, silence descends, thick, sacred, trembling. Her fire calms. The air cools. For a heartbeat, there is only the sound of their breathing. "You stood for me," he says softly, voice hoarse but clear. "Even when I couldn't stand for myself." She doesn't answer. Words are too small for what binds them. Instead, she takes his hand, guiding it to her heart. Beneath his touch, her pulse roars like a storm. His fingers tighten, the connection sparking through them, a current older than blood, older than prophecy. "Do you trust me?" she asks, eyes glimmering. He nods once, unguarded. "I always did. Even when I tried not to." The world tilts then, time bending around them. The voices of the dead Alphas rise again, not as command, but as blessing. The fire that had once consumed her now flows into him, uniting their fates. The mark of the Alpha burns anew on his skin, this time shared. The crippled king and accursed girl reborn in the same flame. The storm outside the Colosseum gathers force. Lightning dances along the horizon, echoing the beat of her power. Shadows move beyond the ruins, wolves drawn by the call of something holy, something lost now returned. The horde advances, not all enemies, not all friends, but all witnesses. The pack is coming, and they will see who truly leads. She lifts her head, feeling the storm pulse with her heartbeat. "They will come for us," she says. "Then let them," he replies. "They will find no victims here." Together they step forward, and the ground shifts in recognition. Her flame forms a path through the wreckage, guiding them toward the open plain where the battle awaits. Around them, the world breathes, every gust of wind a whisper of rebirth. As they walk, memories bleed through, the night she was hunted, the lies she believed, the moments she almost gave up. All of it, now, becomes fuel. The ghosts that once haunted her no longer whisper warnings but hymns. She realizes then that the prophecy was never about destruction. She will burn the pack from within was not a curse, it was transformation. Fire destroys what is false. Fire remakes what must endure. When they reach the edge of the ruin, the horde appears. Wolves of every color and creed fill the valley, their eyes reflecting the stormlight. Some snarl. Some kneel. All watch. She feels the pull of fear, of doubt, but he stands beside her, hand brushing hers, silent and steady. Show them, he murmurs. Show them who you are. Her chest rises, breath deep, steady. Then, with a single motion, she raises her hands. The silver flame bursts forth, not as violence, but revelation. The fire spreads across the sky, forming patterns of memory and truth. Every lie told by the council disintegrates in the light. Every hidden death, every silenced voice, now sings. The wolves drop to their knees, not in worship but in recognition. The Alpha's brother stumbles into the clearing, his defiance extinguished. He looks upon the scene with hollow eyes and finally understands. He was never the heir. He was the shadow that made light necessary. The Alpha steps forward, standing before his people, not as ruler, but as equal. His voice carries through the wind, strong again, resonant. We have lived in darkness long enough. Let the fire show us who we were meant to be. The pack howls. The sound tears through the heavens, shaking the clouds, calling the stars to witness. She closes her eyes. For the first time, she feels peace, not the absence of pain, but the knowing that every scar, every betrayal, every drop of blood led her here. Her power no longer feels like a burden. It feels like belonging. As dawn breaks, the silver flame fades into morning light. The Colosseum is gone, the throne reduced to ash. But in its place stands something greater, a bond, forged in fire, unbreakable. She turns to him, their eyes meeting, and in that look is everything unspoken, love born of ruin, strength born of surrender, destiny claimed by choice. She is no one's sacrifice. She never was. The wind carries her final whisper through the valley, a vow not of vengeance, but of beginning. I am not your sacrifice. I am the flame that endures. And the world, reborn in her fire, kneels, not to a queen, not to a god, but to a woman who remembered her name. The battlefield is quiet now. Smoke drifts through the hollowed Colosseum, curling like ghosts above the ashes of a broken empire. The scent of rain and blood lingers in the air, sharp, metallic, alive. The fire that consumed the night has faded into a silver mist, but its echo still trembles through the ground, through her bones, through the silence that refuses to end. She stands where the last of the flames die, chest heaving, body trembling from the storm she unleashed. Her skin glows faintly in the pale light, marked by the residue of power that still clings to her like a second skin. The silver in her veins hums, softer now, almost tender. She can taste the smoke in her throat, feel the ache in her muscles. But it's not weakness, it's proof. Proof that she survived. Proof that she became something no prophecy could define. The wind moves through the ruins, carrying whispers of names. Those who fell, those who fled, those who watched and understood too late what they were witnessing. She doesn't look back. The past is ash behind her. The fire has chosen what to keep and what to erase. All that remains is truth. Across the ruins, he stands. The Alpha who once watched from his throne now stands barefoot in the dirt, his crown gone, his armor cracked, his body scarred but unbroken. The paralysis is no more. His strength has returned, though not as it once was. It is quieter now, tempered by awe, softened by love. He stares at her as though seeing the divine walk in human form, and perhaps, in this moment, he is. Their eyes meet through the drifting smoke. The world stills. No sound dares to move between them. She feels the weight of his gaze, not as claim, not as power, but as understanding. Everything they have lost, everything they have become, lives in that one silent exchange. The night is over, but something larger is only beginning. Her hand rises unconsciously, fingers shaking as she traces the air where the bond between them burns invisible but eternal. She knows the cost of this power now. Every gift demands its sacrifice. And though the fire calls her name, whispers that her purpose lies beyond him, she lingers, just for this breath, this heartbeat, this fragile piece. The dawn spills gold across the horizon, washing the battlefield in light. Smoke catches the sun, turning it into rivers of silver and flame. The wolves that once howled in defiance now kneel in reverence, their fur glinting with dew and ash. The old world is dying behind her, the new one waits before her. She should walk forward. She should leave. Every instinct tells her to. But her body won't move. Not yet. The bond between them hums too loud, the pull too deep. The air thickens with all the words they've never spoken. The ache between them is not distance, it's gravity. He steps closer. Each stride measured, uncertain, reverent. The wind catches the edge of his cloak, the fabric torn and blackened, the symbol of his house burned away. He has no title now. No crown. Only the truth of who he is, and who she has become. When he finally stops before her, the silence feels alive. She can feel his warmth, the rhythm of his heartbeat, the faint scent of smoke and earth clinging to his skin. For a moment, he looks at her as if searching for the girl who once hid behind walls, the one who trembled beneath the weight of destiny. But that girl is gone. In her place stands the woman who burned the sky to make the world see. His lips part as if to speak, but no words come. There is nothing left to say. Every secret, every betrayal, every vow is already written in the way they breathe in sync. The fire flickers once more between them, a final shimmer of light, fragile, fading. And she understands, their story was never meant to end in peace. It was meant to ignite something larger. Something that outlives them both. Her fingers twitch at her side. His hand moves too, almost reaching, almost touching. But before contact can bridge the air, a gust of wind cuts through the ruins, scattering ash like feathers. The sound it makes is hauntingly human, like a sigh, or a farewell. She turns her head slightly, eyes catching the horizon where storm clouds bleed into dawn. There's movement in the distance, a shadow rising, a call waiting to be answered. The fire within her stirs again, restless, insistent. The war may be over, but her purpose is not. The gods never create peace, they create beginnings disguised as endings. He feels it too. The shift. The coming storm. The space between them hums with the weight of everything left unsaid. His throat tightens. "Will you stay?" he asks, voice rough, uncertain. Her answer is a whisper, soft but unbreakable. "Would you still ask that if you knew what I am now?" He looks at her then, not as savior, not as weapon, not as the flame that restored him, but as the woman who could burn the world and still leave him wanting her touch. His eyes darken, grief and devotion warring behind them. "Then tell me what to do." She steps back, just enough for the distance to sting. "Don't follow me," she says. "Just remember me." Lightning breaks across the sky, silent and sharp. It dances along the edges of her silhouette, gilding her in silver fire. She stands taller, fiercer, a living myth framed by dawn. The wind tugs at her hair, carrying sparks that fade into the horizon. Every step she takes forward feels like eternity unraveling. He watches her go, his chest hollow but full of awe. The world bends around her path, trees leaning, clouds parting, the air itself trembling. The wolves follow her silently, heads low, understanding what he cannot say, that legends are never meant to stay. They belong to the fire. She pauses once at the ridge. The ruins stretch behind her, the battlefield littered with what was. She doesn't look back at him, but her voice carries, low and fierce, echoing through the dawn. The fire does not end here. Then she vanishes into the light. The alpha remains. The wind dies. The silence that follows is unbearable. Around him, the wolves bow, awaiting command. But he cannot move. His gaze stays fixed where she disappeared, where the sky still glows faintly with her light. Somewhere deep inside, he knows she will return. Not as savior, but as reckoning. When she does, the world will burn again, but differently. Not in destruction, but in truth. Smoke curls upward, soft, spiraling, beautiful. The air hums with her name, the one whispered by gods and carried by the dead. And in that silence, the voice comes, not hers, not his, but something beyond them both. A voice that feels like memory, like prophecy, like invitation. Would you have feared her, or followed her into the fire? The question lingers, searing through the heart, echoing past the screen, through every listener's chest until silence answers. Then, softer, almost a breath. Another voice follows. If this story lit something inside you, subscribe to Sophie's Romance Collections. Because here, we tell tales that burn. And the final sound before the fade is a heartbeat, hers, his, the world's, steady, defiant, alive. Then, silence. The wind howls through the ruins like a wounded beast, carrying the scent of smoke, blood, and prophecy. It weaves through broken stone and shattered marble, mournful, relentless, a dirge for what has fallen, and a warning for what has yet to rise. The ground still hums with her fire. Every crack in the earth glows faintly silver, pulsing like the heartbeat of a living world struggling to remember what it once was. The battlefield lies in ruin. Ashes drift where banners once flew. Wolves move silently through the wreckage, their eyes reflecting the dim light of dawn. They are not celebrating. They are waiting. The silence between them feels heavier than grief, an ache shaped by questions no one dares to speak aloud. Far beyond the smoke, past the reach of her flame, something stirs. A figure stands in the shadow of a half-burned tower, his body cloaked in darkness. His breath fogs in the cold morning air, steady, deliberate. The faint glow of runes flickers beneath his skin, marks that mirror hers, but darker, deeper, older. The silver flames twin. He watches the horizon where she vanished. His eyes, gray as ash in storm, follow the faint line of smoke that still lingers in the sky. For a long moment, he doesn't move. He listens. The wind carries her name like a ghost, soft, aching. Then, from the depths of the forest, another voice answers, low, ancient, filled with something that sounds like hunger. The earth trembles. Not with destruction, but awakening. Beneath his feet, roots twist and pulse with energy. The ground is alive again, drawn to the power he carries. He closes his eyes, and for the briefest second, the memory of her face flashes behind them, eyes of fire, hands of mercy, power that defied gods. A storm brews in his chest. She thinks it's over, he whispers, voice rough from silence. She thinks the fire ends with her. His fingers curl into a fist, and the mark on his wrist ignites, a deep crimson instead of silver. The light burns through his veins like molten iron, crawling up his arm until it reaches his throat. His breath catches. His pulse surges. The mark spreads across his chest, blooming like a wound reborn as power. In the still air, the faint echo of the prophecy returns, not as words, but as resonance, as memory. Two flames born of one storm. One to burn the world clean. One to reclaim it. His jaw tightens. The fire around him flickers to life, not silver, not gold, but black, threaded with red veins that move like blood through flame. The shadows stretch toward him, drawn like worshippers to a god reborn. He lifts his head, and the moon, pale and dying against the dawn, glints across his face. His features are carved from defiance and destiny. Handsome in a way that makes danger seem like desire. The wolves that survived the fire lower themselves instinctively, ears pressed back, sensing the shift. Something old, something sacred, something forgotten now stands among them again. He steps forward, the ashes parting under his boots. The ruins respond, ancient stones humming as his presence wakes their dormant power. A gust of wind tears through the Colosseum, scattering debris and bending the last standing torch until the flame bows in his direction. She is not the only one, the wind whispers, as if the world itself remembers what he was. His mouth curves, not into a smile, but something colder. No, he murmurs, eyes still on the fading horizon. She was the beginning. The words linger, carried on the breath of dawn. In the silence that follows, the forest begins to stir. From the shadows, eyes blink open, dozens, hundreds, each pair glowing with the same crimson hue that burns beneath his skin. Wolves that had long been lost to legend now crawl from the darkness, their bodies lean, their fur marked with ancient sigils. The old bloodline, the forgotten alpha's kin. He raises his hand, and they freeze, trembling beneath the force of his command. Power ripples through the air, thick and undeniable. The world bows to fire now, he says softly, voice like smoke and thunder. But fire forgets one thing, shadows burn last. The wolves lower their heads in reverence. He closes his eyes, letting the storm inside him settle into rhythm. For centuries, his kind waited, silenced, buried under the ashes of myth. Now, her flame has awakened him. Now, destiny begins again. Somewhere in the distance, a whisper curls through the air, her voice, faint, unknowing. His mark glows brighter, responding to her. Two sides of the same storm, drawn together by something the gods themselves once feared. He tilts his head toward the sound. "You'll come back," he says quietly. "You always do." The forest exhales. Leaves tremble. The first drop of rain falls, a single bead of silver that lands on his palm, sizzling against his heat. He looks down, and for a moment, sorrow shadows his expression. Whatever waits between them isn't love or war. It's both. It always was. The horizon bleeds gold. The wolves rise behind him, forming a crescent of bodies and breath and waiting hunger. He takes a step toward the light, and the world seems to shift with him, sky darkening, wind bending, the faint hum of prophecy vibrating through the ruins. The camera of the mind pulls back slowly, showing the broken Colosseum, the smoldering earth, the vast wilderness stretching toward eternity. Somewhere, far beyond sight, her figure moves through that same dawn, her silver flame glowing faintly in the distance. Two paths, one destiny. Two fires, one reckoning. And between them, silence. A silence heavy with promise. A silence that breathes the shape of coming war. Then, from nowhere and everywhere, a voice, soft, ancient, omniscient, whispers again through the wind. The true Alpha hasn't risen yet. The mark on his chest flares in answer, bright enough to paint the trees in crimson light. His eyes lift once more toward the sky, toward the fading streak of silver that marks where she's gone. "This isn't over," he says, and the forest answers with a growl that shakes the earth. Lightning claws the clouds. The ruins catch fire again, this time black and red. The wolves begin to howl, their voices layered and haunting, echoing through valleys and mountains until even the gods themselves must hear. Then, fade to black. The howling fades. The heartbeat slows. Only the wind remains. And with it, one final whisper curling through the darkness, gentle, daring, alive. The story continues.